Welcome back. So what I want to talk about now is the project repository in VS Code. Once you've cloned the repository to your laptop, you can go ahead and open it in VS Code. If you're using GitHub Desktop, there's usually a button that you can click to open the repository in GitHub Desktop. To open the repository in VS Code. Otherwise, just open it however you would like to. So the first thing we need to do is take the env.template file and make a copy of it so that we can set up environment variables for connecting to the database. So the purpose of this is to ensure that in our source code base, we don't include any passwords directly in something we're going to push to a public GitHub repository. This is very standard practice. There's different strategies for keeping secrets, secret. So we're just using a simple one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, click on the file in the File Explorer, and I'm just going to copy and paste it. You can use the keyboard shortcuts, Control C, Control V if you're on Windows, or Command C, Command V if you're on a Mac. So once I've done that, I'm going to now just rename it to .env. And get rid of the template end. Now, you may be inclined to simply rename the .env.template to .env and change it, but then you'll lose the template file potentially when you push the repository for other team members to make use of. So once you've made a copy of the file, named it .env, open it, and I'm going to go ahead and close the environment. And then all you need to change is the password right here for the MySQL root password. Now, it's important to note that not every team member needs the same password, because this is representative of a local version of MySQL that's going to be running on your laptop in Docker. And so each of you can have a different MySQL root password. I don't encourage you to use anything like your, Northeastern logon password or anything important like that. Just make up a different password, and if you ever can't remember what it is, you can always come look in this file to grab it. Okay, so I'm just going to put some password here like what's up doc exclamation point. Okay, so I'm going to save that file, and so now we have our MySQL root password ready to go. Now, let's go to the Docker Compose file. Let me talk through a little bit of it here for you. If you recall from class, the Docker Compose file essentially sets up 3 different containers. In Docker lingo, they're kind of called services. It's not super important what the difference is, but each service is going to be running in its own container in Docker. So we're going to have the app, which is the front end. So this will be the Streamlit application. And importantly, the port that you'll use to access it from your laptop will be 8501 from the browser when you get to the browser. I'll show you that in a second. The API, so this is the Flask API, will be running on port 4000. And then the database, which is MySQL 8, will be running on port 3200 instead of 3306. Now, you'll notice in the app and the API folders, services, there's this command to build. What that is referring to is, let's just take a look at inside the app folder. So if I open app, you'll notice there's a Docker file. So Docker Compose is a tool that you can use to sort of organize a collection of Docker containers that will be working together for an application. A Docker file is a file that's used to essentially build an image that you can turn into a container. Now, there's a web portal called Docker Hub that has literally thousands, if not millions, of already existing Docker files and images and whatnot that you could use. But for these, the app and the API, I have made a custom one for you. They're not super complicated, so let me just show you so you'll know it's not magic. So let's say we're looking at the app folder. I'm sorry, the app container. So you'll notice inside the Docker file for the app, we're starting with the from command essentially says, this is the image that I kind of want to use as my base image for my new Docker image that I'm creating. So we're starting with one called Python version 3.11, and Slim refers to sort of the underlying infrastructure. It's not that important. We're creating a working directory inside the application, inside the container. And the working directory is sort of like the home base for the in this case, this will be the Streamlit application to run. Okay. Now, once I kind of create the working directory, then I need to take the Python, the base image that I'm using, and do some updates. You'll know, if you're familiar with Unix or Linux, sorry, you'll notice that this is apt-get. So this is Slim is based on a Debian distribution of Linux. But in any event, I'm updating it and installing any updates I need, and then I'm also installing, updating the sources of the different packages that I want to install, and then I'm actually installing a few. So I'm installing Build Essential, curl, software properties, Git, and then I'm removing some stuff that I don't need after that. I'm just telling you how this works. Don't change anything inside this file. So once the container's been updated, then I'm going to copy inside of it. And this is all during the image build process, by the way. I'm going to copy into, end up being an app code, but I'm going to copy the source requirements.txt file. So that's this file, and it's going to copy it automatically. Oops, sorry, let me get back to the Docker file. And then inside the image, or what will be the container, I'm running pip3 install everything that's inside that requirements file. So everything here will be installed inside the requirements file. This run ls is going to just print out the contents of the app code folder for our debugging purposes, and I'll show you how to get to that in a second. And then we're telling the container that we want to make the containers port 8501 public to the sort of local machine. And so that relates to the 8501 mapped to 8501 here. So the 8501 of the container or the image, I mean, it doesn't have any real meaning until it's a container. But that relates to the second number here. So in terms of the port mapping in the Docker Compose, it's local, or the host port, your laptop, and then whatever the port for the container is. All right. And then finally, we have a command that will run the Streamlit application inside the container. Now, this doesn't actually execute until you build a container from the image, but it's there. That's how the container will the container will know what software to start. Okay, so that's the application one. If you look at the API Docker file, you'll notice that it's kind of the same, but a bit simpler because this is the Flask setup. But in any event, we're still starting with Slim. We're still using an API code working directory, installing some stuff. We don't need to do the apt update and whatnot because this is just pure Python. And then we are copying everything from the folder into the image, and then we're exposing port 4000. And whenever the container spins up, it's going to run this command right here. So yeah, that is the basis of the Docker files. Again, don't change anything in these Docker files. You don't really need to change anything in the Docker Compose either. I just wanted to give you a sense of what's going on. Now, let me tell you one more thing about the Docker Compose file. You'll notice each of these has a volumes section, a volumes command. And what's happening with this volume command is it's basically taking this folder, let's say for the app, it's taking this folder, app source, which is this folder right here, app source, and it's mapping it to inside the container to be called app code. Remember, that was our working directory. So the best analogy I can give you is it's sort of like taking the app source folder, like on a USB drive and plugging it, quote unquote, into the container. And inside the container, it shows up in a folder called app code. That's the best I can give you. Same thing for volumes for the API. It's using the full API folder right here. And it is mapping that into the API code folder for the API container. The database is a little bit different. Don't worry about the brackets. The brackets just indicate if you're going to pass a list of folders you wanted to do a mapping on. For the database container, you'll notice that there is a folder in the repo called database files, and there's some sample SQL files in it already. So the particular container that we're using, MySQL, will look inside whatever folder that is mapped into the container as Docker entry point, this thing right here. You don't need to memorize it, of course. So it will map whatever's in database files into that folder. And then MySQL knows that, this is important, when the container is created, not just when it started, but when it's created, it will go to that folder and it will execute every SQL file that's in there, essentially in alphabetic order. So you'll notice that for Northwind, there's, I've prepended them with 0001 and so on. That just makes it easier to see the order they're going to be executed in. Now, and this thing at the end stands for read only. So the container can't change what's in this file, just only read it. All right, so whenever we start the containers, the database, the MySQL is going to take these files and execute them so that, MySQL, the classic models, and this other little to-do database will be created inside the MySQL server that's part of the project. Okay, so that's kind of the high-level overview of the architecture. So what I'm going to do now is I want to start the containers. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this. There is, I want to start all the containers at one time. There is I want to start one container and sort of debug it. Lots of different options. So sorry, just making a note to write something for y'all. The way we're going to do it is we're going to initially, I'm just going to spin them all up, and you'll kind of see what happens. So from the terminal, make sure that you're in the folder, but if you open the terminal that's inside VS Code, it should automatically load you in the folder that you opened. If you're doing this from a separate terminal, you'll need to use the CD, the change directory command, to navigate to wherever your project repository is. Okay, so inside this folder, or inside this terminal, I am going to, well, first make sure that you have access to Docker if you haven't already used it in the terminal. So you can say docker -- version, and you should get a version number. So if you get a command not found or something similar, that means the command line Docker commands are not set up properly, which you may need to reach out to me or a TA to get help fixing that. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is, or the first way we're going to do this is just to spin them all up at the same time, and then I'll show you how to look at the logs and how to see what's happening in the Docker desktop. So I'm going to type docker compose up, and so this is going to look in whatever folder I'm in for a docker compose.yaml file. It's going to say docker compose. It's going to look inside there, and the up command says spin up all of the services and everything that's in there. And then I'm going to put -d. So -d means for running in detached mode. If you don't put the -d, then Docker takes over this terminal and you can't use it anymore, and the only way to get it back is to stop the containers and sort of restart them some other way. But if you do -d, it will start them up and give you back the terminal. So let me just show you what happens. So we'll hit enter. So first thing it's going to do is it needs to build the images for the app container and the API container. if you don't already have them built. I think I have one of them already built on my system, but it's okay. It might take longer is all I'm saying. And then you can see it starts the front-end container, the MySQL DB container, and the web API container. Now you're like, we didn't talk about front-end, but I gave the containers different names rather than just the service name. So front-end, web API, and MySQL DB. So that's why these are different. And then also the containers are organized in essentially like a virtual private network inside Docker. Okay, so it's saying the containers have been started. So what I'm going to do is switch to Docker Desktop. I'm going to make sure I'm on the Containers tab, and you should see the containers running under this stack. This is called a stack, and then there are 3 containers. We have the Web API, MySQL DB, and then the front end. Okay. Things seem to have worked well. If there was some problem, one of these icons might be either yellow or gray, sort of like this one, or I guess that one, indicating there's some problem that needs to be debugged. But if they're all green, that means things are going well. So if they are, great. If not, seek some assistance. All right, I'm going to stop this video here and then pick up from here in the next video.